I found this topic really interesting this week. Not really necessarily surprising that we're talking about um, multicultural practices in STEM education, because it is true that for a long time it has been dominated by Caucasian males, at least in the United States. But I've seen this in a couple of ways in my 5 years of teaching. So one way is that I'm a FACS teacher, and so most of my students are female, and most of the students in the FACS department, or that take classes in the FACS department, are female. Whereas across the hall in the shop classes, most of the students in those classes are male. And that's even if they've chosen the class or their counselor chose the class for them so that they could get their required CTE credit. So I just find that kind of interesting that even if it wasn't necessarily a student's choice, that they were still put into a class based on gender preferences, or typical gender preferences, I should say. But I usually do a survey at the beginning of my class, and I always ask, like, why are you taking this class? And you can be honest, it might just be for the CTE credit. And I do have more male students saying that they were put in the class by their counselor than I do female. But it is still typical that I have less males in general. And then the other thing that I have noticed is that I teach in a Title I school that's predominantly Hispanic students in West Valley. So we're over 50%, or right around 50% Hispanic. And then the other 50% is broken up between other, mostly minorities. So the thing that recently our school has started promoting is AP classes, and they're trying to increase enrollment in AP classes. And they had everyone in the school take these surveys to try to figure out what it is that's holding our students back from taking an AP class. And it's kind of surprising. The results show that a lot of them they don't feel like they have support, or they don't feel like they have the resources, such as a computer at home to do assignments, to keep up in an AP class. And so these sorts of things hold them back from these AP classes that could really give them a jump start in STEM classes, and therefore STEM careers. And so it's just kind of interesting that a lot of our AP kids tend to be our Caucasian kids, or kids that tend to have a higher socioeconomic, their family has a higher socioeconomic status. And so they tend to have more support, they tend to have more resources at home. And so now our school is trying to figure out, well, how can we make these classes more accessible to our other students? And so it'll be kind of interesting to see how they're able to address that in the next coming years, and how we as teachers can support that. As far as how I might be able to promote interventions as a CTE educator, it's kind of interesting, because just this week our school is made up task forces. So they've pinpointed things that we feel like we as the teachers feel need to be improved in our school. And they've made task forces to focus in on those main things that we feel are important to make changes in. And I am on the task force for interventions. And one of the teachers one of the other teachers on the task force is a math teacher, and he was saying how when ninth graders come in, they give them a very basic math test, like elementary school math test, and 90% of the students can't pass it. They can't add, the example he gave was 13 plus 3. They can't do it without a calculator. They don't know basic math. And so we were talking about, the other interesting thing I should add is that one of our feeder schools, one of our feeder junior highs is considered a STEM school. So their students are learning STEM skills, and they're not being carried on at all in our high school. So it's kind of like they have this introduction to STEM, and they're gaining skills and experience in STEM education, and then it just stops as soon as they get to our campus. So one of our assistant principals was in our meeting as well, and we were talking about possible strategies or just teaching methods that could be used to help students to bridge the gap and to help students to be more successful. And I brought up that I was taking this class and that I can really see the value of STEM and how it integrates different courses, and how, we could even reach beyond the STEM subjects and, get our English teachers involved in helping kids write lab reports and things like that. And he basically just automatically shut it down and said, well, we always are thinking of programs that we can bring in to solve our problems, but, there's just so many to choose from, and, just because kids are coming from a STEM school doesn't mean that they have STEM skills, and on, basically making excuses for why our school was not well suited for STEM. And I was very surprised that he's so quick to even turn down the idea of maybe using some of the strategies of STEM education. Just teachers having time to talk to each other and figure out what they're teaching in the math class that could be supported in science, and so on and so forth. It was just like automatically shut down. And so it was eye-opening to me about how much I really do need to advocate for STEM, and how I really need to make sure that I'm using STEM principles in my class so that I could use it as a model of how STEM can be used to benefit the students and to help them reach higher levels of understanding, and to add rigor to my classroom. And that could help me to be a better advocate and promote STEM as a viable intervention for the students in our school. So that was something that was, I think, going back to the article by Byers and Winston, is that communication about STEM and what it is, and how using it can really benefit students and prepare them for careers in STEM later on down the road, and how those careers can benefit them. So I'm really glad I had that experience, because now it's opened my eyes to just how important it is for me to be implementing these STEM principles in my school, or in my classroom, so that hopefully I can help my school to see how valuable it could be in using it across the school.